You are listening to Mind Shack. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. And we are going to attempt to tackle today why entertainment sucks nowadays. If you haven't checked out the Collapse of Hollywood podcast I did, which was more of a play-by-play, so to speak, I'm going to attempt an even broader explanation generationally on why everything is on the decline in entertainment in typical Mind Shack fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you've noticed that most movies and TV shows are just absolute garbage nowadays, music as well, although there are more exceptions in the musical field, and also books are somewhat exempted as well. We'll talk about why. Of course, if you find the Mind Shock podcast interesting and informative, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help support logic and reason in a world where it is quickly going extinct. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. If you're still not getting notifications, just like and comment on more videos. That's how the YouTube algorithm works. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the Bruce McGuire channel. I upload some stuff there that I don't upload on the main Mind Shock channel. Like and share, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. All right, so I guess we could start with the main point. What is the main reason, if you can only pick one reason, on why entertainment itself has basically gone down the drain? I mean, it's just, the quality's just not existent. However, the technology is obviously so much farther ahead than in previous generations. So let's examine the 80s and 90s. I mean, these two decades, some people consider the 90s the last great decade. Some people consider the 80s the pinnacle of Western civilization, and it started to go downhill there as well. Obviously, there's many factors, economy-based and otherwise. But let's just look at entertainment value of entertainment itself. How fun were movies and TV shows in the 80s? If I had to pinpoint, I would say I would put peak entertainment. I mean, it's really tough because even going all the way through the late 90s, even though there was a certain amount of cynicism, nihilism, kind of the unwinding of grunge. I mean, you had goth culture picking up. I mean, obviously there were goths in the 80s as well. You had a lot going on. And with the rise of the internet, there was just a lot more connectivity. So diversity and quality-wise, I mean, some people would actually pick maybe 1999 as one of the best years for entertainment as a whole, including just a diverse offering in both quality and quantity. I mean, if you really want a metric on factoring both quality and quantity, you might have to go maybe 1999. Now, in just pure entertainment value, without necessarily factoring quality and quantity, just entertainment value for the sake of entertainment value. Fun for the sake of fun. Not necessarily fine-tuned technical mastery in the realm of film, television, music, etc. I would actually maybe the year range I would give, and I'm obviously looking forward to hearing from all the Mind Shock listeners on the range they would give, and also how old you are in terms of why you had that pick. Because are people that were around in the 50s and 60s and 70s, would they still pick the 80s? That's always curious on how everything devolves. But my pick, my years, I think I would have to pick maybe 85 to 95 if I had to pick 10 years. 85 to 95 just in terms of pure fun factor. Not necessarily refined technical entertainment, but just fun factor, and also the ability. I want to make it distinct from the willing suspension of disbelief. It's not, yeah, movies can be enthralling, you get lost in the movie. That's a little bit separate than just pure believability and conviction of artists. So where am I going with all this? Nowadays, and this wasn't an overnight switch. The early 2000s were still plenty entertaining. You know, obviously the 9/11 shift in consciousness across the world for the negative was a factor, but it wasn't, I wouldn't call it a magic switch. There was still plenty of entertainment that was still fun. I mean, it would be curious to pick, like, what was the last pure fun movie or TV show that wasn't trash? You know, that's really tough. I'm not even sure I could answer that. But the years, are we really going to say? I mean, I guess by 2010. I mean, we could go occult by 2012. Let's say the shift was complete. I mean, has anything truly highly entertaining? I'm not talking about quality. Obviously, you do get some decent projects. I don't want to say slipping through the cracks, but it's almost like they slipped through the cracks and they just happen to be good. Just lightning in a bottle style, where it was almost like it was just, you know, the stars aligned and there was a decent project slipping through the cracks here or there. I'm not saying there aren't those. I don't know. I guess 2010 might be more fair than 2012. I can't recall anything decently fun coming out post 2010. Maybe even like 2007, 2008. I don't know. I really, it's really tough. Whereas in that window from, let's say, 85, you could probably even say 84 to 94, you can make that argument, because the internet just really got popular going into the mid 90s. And that could all be coincidental. But here's the main point of all of it. All entertainment now, most 99.9%, I'm not talking about those outliers. You can find some really artistic and talented people making highly entertaining stuff. You can find some somewhere. But 99% of the entire entertainment industry, it's all turned into content generation. It's all content based. They're not really artists making art. They're content creators creating content using high level technology. So it's just high level eye candy content with no soul. I've mentioned this before. And it's not just about the lack of soul. It's about, I guess you could even use the word conviction. And I was really thinking about why. Because you could, obviously there's still good actors that can act well. There are singers who could hit notes. I mean, that's not really what I'm talking about in question. Part of it is obviously this ADHD soundbite type society that we've devolved to. But it's a little bit more than that too. It's like an actor or musician. Not that people didn't go into it for the lifestyle as opposed to the craft in the 80s and 90s. Obviously they did. You could even argue the majority did. But there was a certain presence of mind, just being present in what you were doing. And that came across in the product. So even if you want to take, like, I don't know, some random cheesy Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. I mean, Van Damme was sold on who he was as Van Damme. Whereas you can watch, I don't know, The Rock or some other so-called action star nowadays. It's like there's no soul. He's not even sold on himself. He's going to collect a paycheck. Where it's almost like Van Damme was proud to be cheesy in a sense. Not that he was being cheesy to be cheesy. He was just being himself and come what may. He was unapologetically authentic. And here's kind of a bigger point. The fluoride stare. So obviously there was a lot less chemicals around, especially when these people were maturing and growing. Because as children, So the adults of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when they were developing, as children in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s, whatever, depending on the age range, there weren't all these chemicals in all the food and the water and just this level of environmental toxicity. Now, a lot of coincidence theorists, they might find this silly, but I think there's something to that. People were just healthier across the board, and I don't necessarily mean allergies and physical ailments. I'm talking about mental sharpness, mental acuity, where you could just be more present in the moment, and that comes across in all art and entertainment. And it's basically gone now. It's just gone. And this is also not isolated. It's in combination with just the world is just more of a serious place nowadays. There's a more somber tone, and you could argue that kind of the switch to the 24/7 news cycle, hearing about all the tragedies in the world every second of every day. Not that there weren't plenty of tragedies decades past. You just weren't plugged in 24/7, hearing about them every single second. So there's a lot of that as well. It's many, many different factors. But how many entertainers are truly charismatic nowadays? And is that because of just the fluoridization of the West? And I'm kind of using that as an umbrella. I don't just mean the fluoride in the water. I mean all these other chemicals having all these various effects, particularly through childhood into adulthood, and the effect that might have on DNA, on mental acuity, on just the fun factor, the entertainment value. Like, where's the fun? Everything's all kind of lost in being politicized, and triggered goofs getting triggered over everything. So that's kind of the crux, I would put it there, where that's kind of the main point, is that you can't really have these highly charismatic people that are present in the moment. They're just happy to be alive, and that's coming across in their art. Now, again, you could find a couple of exceptions, no question. You probably could. If I had to throw one out on the subject of Van Damme and Van Damme movies, Stan Bush, who did a lot of those soundtracks, Bloodsport, Kickboxer, a lot of those soundtracks, Transformers movies, if you listen to his music, he actually never stopped making music. And he's still got that 80s fun vibe. And he never lost it. So that would be one of the exceptions, but it's not even really a true exception, because he grew up when he grew up, not under heavy fluoridization. So in terms of somebody new coming onto the scene, and that's a little bit tougher. I mean, there's some synthwave bands that kind of make brand new music, but it sounds like it's out of the 80s. It's fun. And yeah, you can find some exceptions. But for the most part, how many movies and TV shows, like the conviction's not just there, even in the acting, even if it's a technically sound actor, it's almost like they don't buy it themselves. It's even in action movies. I mean, look at superhero movies. Everything's done by the CG, or it's done pretty much by everybody except the actor. And it's all done for them, so there's no soul. It's just empty content just being churned out. And again, back in the 80s and 90s, even on these cheap, low-budget movies, B movies, C movies, Z movies, I mean, who's the Roger Corman of today? I mean, I don't know. Where are the low-budget, where are all these, like, super fun, low-budget movies? I mean, it's all garbage. I mean, Mind Shock listeners, if you've seen something decent, feel free to throw it out there. But 99% of everything, both in the mainstream and not in the mainstream, is pretty much unwatchable, in my not so humble opinion. It's just tough. Now, a curious exemption to this, I would say, would be novels. If you read, I don't want to say it's a 100% exemption, because there's still been obviously a noticeable slide, especially in some of those popular novels. Like you got James Patterson and his ghostwriters just churning out schlock. Although there'll be some decent titles mixed in there somewhere. Every now and then there's a pretty solid schlocky entertaining title here and there. But for the most part, I think it's because you can't really dress up a book. You don't have that eye candy. So it's either going to be good or it's not. Whereas with visual media like movies and TV shows, you can even argue comic books went down the gutter as well. I mean, part of it's a lot of that woke nonsense, just politicizing everything. And what doesn't make sense about the so-called representation, if you look at the world, so if something takes place in America, you look at the percentages, like you have all these token characters that by probability there should be way less of them, and they're the entire cast. Whereas if you have a movie, let's say it takes place in China, you'd have most of the people be Chinese. I mean, you're not gonna check boxes for the sake of diversity. I mean, you might have one or two foreign characters, but it's going to look quite silly. Whereas in the West, especially some of these, it's just kind of weird. I'm not going to get into, obviously, the detailed specifics, because a lot of goofs probably going to get triggered. But there's accurate representation relative to statistics, and there's severely inaccurate representation based on percentages of population. I mean, it's wacky. A lot of the Marvel movies, obviously. I mean, yeah, just compare Asgard to Wakanda, draw your own conclusions. And this level of goofery kind of infects everything. But even if it wasn't woke nonsense, it still wouldn't have been that good because of these other factors. Because there really aren't any more stars these days. Where's the charisma? Where's the believability? I mean, part of it is everybody's walking on eggshells. But even if they weren't, I mean, is there just too much fluoride in the water supply? Are there just too many chemicals in the food supply where you just can't have these larger than life, engaging, charismatic stars anymore? And when everybody's just trying to get as much content out there instead of making quality, soulful art, does that all adequately explain the situation in entertainment today? Is it really all just that simple? Because if you look at anything action-based, I mean dramatic-based too, but let's stick to action because it's just easier to describe this. In any kind of big action scenes in movies today, there's just no believability. Whereas even if you look at the 80s and 90s movies, even if they're hokey, cheesy, camp, whatever you want to call them, it's almost like they're genuine about their camp factor. So it's still fun and entertainment and engaging. Look at movies today that are like, whether they're meta or not, like the camp homages or just some of these cheesy horror movies made in the spirit of the 80s, whatever. It doesn't come across. You don't get that fun factor. It's just the energy's not there. The soul is not there. And I am looking forward to a lot of responses from people of all ages today, because obviously the younger generation, if they're not seeking out older entertainment and just this garbage that's on just this modern garbage, if that's all they know, it's also kind of curious. Because they don't know how fun and engaging and entertaining actual entertainment can be. Like, again, just on a superhero movie, I mean, does anybody actually think the actors are putting their heart and soul? I mean, maybe you might find one here and there. Are they really putting their heart and soul into it? Like even somebody with no talent in some kind of B movie from the 80s, they're putting their heart and soul into it. Whereas actors today, so-called actors, entertainers, it looks like they're going through the motions. Like, let's say they are giving 100% of their ability. If it's dropped that much in one or two generations, it's just coming across as going through the motions. I mean, that might be the best way to describe entertainment as a whole in modern times here, it's content generation where people are simply going through the motions. Is it really that simple? Can we break it down into being that simple? The only real exemption I can think of is maybe in the world of books, the written word. I mean, it's harder to go through the motions in the written word just because it's almost like there's less to distract. So, I mean, unless you're doing picture books or whatever, which that'd be a curiosity. I mean, are any people out there? How are picture books? I mean, I guess I don't know. I haven't looked at picture books recently, like maybe for kids. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. For just the regular novels, the written word, the slide's been a lot slower, but I mean, is reading really that popular, especially with younger people these days? So, yeah, I don't know how much that all means. But in the realm of movies and TV shows, I mean, it's pretty much all garbage out there. Technology is getting better and better. The eye candy, everything's looking. It's all about style over substance now. The substance is all gone. There doesn't seem to be any left. I mean, the closest you could really come to again, people like Tom Cruise, but this is somebody who grew up many, many decades ago. So the fluoride might have less of effect because he was already basically grew into an adult by the mid to late 80s. So that might not be as much of a factor. You just don't really have any charismatic stars anymore. And is it really that simple that everything just kind of got ruined? I mean, it's almost like there was a reverse perfect storm. Everything that went bad. You have this storm of fluoride that just completely robbed everybody, the new generation, of brain function and charisma. You had 9/11 and the 24-hour news cycle just slide everybody into this somber tone for another decade or more. And then you have all this woke nonsense political ideology just rotting the rest of the brain. Whatever little brain power is left has just been rotted away. And technology is as advanced so quick that the soul of everything, of art and entertainment, has just been completely replaced by technology. I mean, that's all I got on the subject now. Really looking forward to everybody's thoughts and comments. So all the logical mind shock legends out there, drop your thoughts on this. And maybe I'll do a follow-up depending on how much I missed. Hope everybody found another edition of the Mind Shock podcast interesting and informative. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.